I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of discussion about difficulty in gaming. Perhaps too much for one lifetime? Are games too hard? Are they too easy? Should games have more difficulty options? Less? None at all? There's a million different videos online that all give their own perspective on the situation, and none of them seem to offer any perfect solutions. You see, difficulty is an incredibly hard thing to get right when creating a game, because you quickly face two massive issues. The first being that everyone who plays a game will have a different skill level going in. The second being that everyone enjoys things differently. So when it comes to games, everyone has a preference for the amount of challenge a game gives them, ranging from wanting no challenge at all, to some challenge as long as it's fair, all the way to beating 2 copies of Elden Ring with a controller and a dance pad at the same time. How the fuck? Now, many games have tried their best to accommodate these varying skill levels and perspectives. Multiple difficulty options have existed in games since before I was born, but due to the incredible amount of discourse still surrounding this subject, nothing seems to have perfected it. There's no game that's just gotten absolutely everything right for everyone, and many people would tell you that trying to make the perfect difficulty system is impossible. But what if I told you they were all wrong? What if I, a YouTuber with just under 100,000 subscribers, was smarter than every game designer on the planet? What if I perfected video game difficulty in this very video? So before we get into talking about difficulty options, I think we should first talk a bit about why difficulty matters. Why do some people care so much about facing challenges when playing a game? Why do others not care at all? Now, the latter point I've actually covered quite in depth in my video on comfort games. Highly recommend you watch that. In that video, I basically talk about the importance of games in relieving stress and feeling relaxed. After all, these are products of entertainment, they do exist to at least partially take our mind off the real world. And sometimes, after a long day, the last thing you want to do is think. So, you pick up a game like Stardew Valley, and you don't have to. The game lets you play forever without missing anything crucial, has no game over screens or permanent failure states, it puts up basically no challenge whatsoever, but instead gives you opportunities to make your own. Do you want to make $1 million doing nothing but selling fish? Do you want to marry every single person in the game? Do you want to achieve 100% completion within the first year? Every bit of difficulty is self-imposed, which means playing the game can be as passive or active as you want it to be. Even outside of Stardew Valley, it's not hard to extrapolate that stress-free desire to understand why so many people enjoy easy games and easy modes. Whether it's to play at your own pace, or because you want to feel like a god amongst men, or maybe just because you want to experience the story and not have to deal with the gameplay, you should be able to find something that caters to your interests. The satisfaction of overcoming a challenge isn't the only way that people have fun with games. However, it is a major one. And speaking of that challenge, you have this niche little series, don't know if you've heard of it, it's very underground and nobody really makes videos about it on YouTube. It's called Dark Souls. The Souls games are notoriously difficult, but that is also crucial to the experience of playing them. As Hidetaka Miyazaki, the president of From Software, once said, "I feel like our approach to these games is to design them to encourage the player to overcome adversity. We don't want players to feel like the game is unfairly punishing, but rather that there's a chance to win a difficult encounter and make progress. We try to design the games to make the cycle of repeatedly trying to overcome these challenges enjoyable in itself." And that's a very important piece of the puzzle here. The best way I can describe most Souls-likes is, have you ever seen that trope in anime or other fiction where the mentor to the protagonist just bullies them to make them stronger? They train them by just fighting non-stop until the hero can finally win. They may even put on the appearance of an outright antagonist and the hero might genuinely hate them, but it's all for the purpose of improvement. They just want to motivate the hero to make them better. Souls-like games are essentially doing that to you. They want you to beat them and to overcome them in the end, but they want to put up as much of a fight as possible before you get there, so you feel a genuine sense of accomplishment. You've genuinely gotten better than the game and beaten it fairly on its own terms. This is why nearly every Souls-like game starts off with a boss that you're meant to lose against. Whether it's Asylum Demon or Genichiro or that goddamn werewolf, the game opens with an encounter designed to kill you, to show you how hard it can be. Then the setting and the music and the enemy designs all try to paint this picture of an oppressive world that you stand no chance against. I mean, the tagline of Dark Souls was "Prepare to die." It is so obviously trying to taunt you into getting invested in beating it, and then it gives you all the tools to do so. But it never lets up the appearance that it's out to get you, because it knows that that's the best motivation for you to keep going. Seeing a dozen "you died" messages is what makes that eventual victory achieved message so much sweeter. And at some point, as Miyazaki points out, you start to just enjoy the process of facing these challenges. Heck, almost all of these games even let you come back and fight that tutorial boss again, so this time you can be the one kicking its ass. This, to me, is essential to the design of difficult games. It's why people like them. They want to face an overwhelming challenge and slowly break it down as they improve their skills. With the more overwhelming the challenge, the more satisfaction you feel in beating it. Taken to the extreme, this is why people get addicted to fighting or rhythm games at the highest level. This is why speedrunners exist. Some people naturally seek out higher and higher skill ceilings so they can work their way up towards them. So in designing the perfect system, I look to these two different perspectives on challenge as a spectrum, where on one end you have something that won't stress you out or give you any problems at all, and on the other you have overwhelming pressure and difficulty you need to overcome. And everyone is going to fall somewhere along that spectrum of enjoyment based on what seems more fun to them. Now, all we need to do to make the perfect difficulty system is accommodate absolutely everyone on that spectrum. That should be easy. How long is this video? Well, we can accommodate different levels of challenge. Like I mentioned earlier, we've actually been doing it for a long time. Since the Atari 2600 at the very least. The console itself actually had physical switches on it that would control the difficulty of the game you were playing. In most games like Asteroids or Cube Earth, easier difficulty would just remove certain enemies or obstacles. In multiplayer games like basketball, it would make one player faster than the other, which is hilarious, though in something like Adventure, it could change up the enemy AI and make them react to the player differently. However, there was one major design flaw. That being that the switches in the 2600 had an A and a B position, and for some godforsaken reason, they made B the easy mode. They say it's because B stands for beginner and A stands for advanced, but I just don't like that. Am I crazy? A should be easy, B should be hard. Atari, listen, I know you stopped producing the 2600 7 years before I was born, but like, come on. Anyway, since the days of early arcade machines and home consoles, difficulty options have become a staple in gaming and have evolved massively, most notably becoming menu options in games instead of physical switches, which is kinda lame. Easy, medium, hard. That's the usual formula that most games follow. Choose the amount of challenge you want, ranging from basically none to as much as possible, and the game should accommodate you, no problem. Though, while on paper it can sound very good, and like it fixes our issues, it also introduces some new ones. First, just consider the way that games are developed. When making enemies in dungeons and bosses, they will only ever start off with one difficulty setting, and the other ones are added on afterwards. Usually, this default difficulty is normal, though sometimes with Alien Isolation, it's actually the hard mode. But in any case, this one starting difficulty ends up being the optimally balanced experience, and some games will even tell you this when you're browsing the menu. So with additional difficulty options coming later in development, it is incredibly tempting to not put as much work into them as the original intended mode. After all, playtesting is time-consuming as it is, and even with just easy, normal, hard, you'd have to rebalance the whole game 3 times over, which results in a lot of games not doing that. In fact, the most common way that additional modes are implemented is just static number changes. Enemies do half as much damage on easy or have twice as much health on hard. Again, theoretically this works, but in reality it usually ends up with some very mediocre results. If you only change static numbers, an enemy on hard will be defeated the exact same way they would be on easy. It just takes more time because they have more health. What would have been a bit of damage on normal is now an instant kill on legendary, meaning lots of games, especially ones with RPG mechanics like the new Assassin's Creeds, will often have these incredibly tedious boss fights on harder difficulties, where you are just running away from the enemy so you don't die immediately and plinking away at their gigantic health bar for minutes on end. And that's if the game's bosses and enemies don't just break outright from the changes in health and damage. There are so many games where the hard mode just isn't that much more difficult than normal until halfway through when one boss or section just steamrolls you. From what I've heard, the Gears of War series on insane difficulty is famous for this. Most levels were obviously challenging, but some of the fights were just in another league entirely. Instant unavoidable deaths, or your companions just standing around getting shot while all you can do is watch. It's like you were playing college basketball and every once in a while they just subbed in LeBron James on the enemy team. More challenging, sure, but in a way that makes you want to quit playing. On the flip side, some games have the opposite problem. like in Cyberpunk 2077, where pretty much no matter what you do, the final boss will be a complete joke if you've played even somewhat competently up until that point. I mean, seriously, I played the whole game on very hard, completely fucked up my build halfway through by investing deep into hacking and then abandoned that to focus on melee, and still managed to kill Adam Smasher in, I'm not joking, a single hit. I've heard that they're overhauling the fight for the release of the new DLC, but it seems like they didn't even playtest him on any difficulty, let alone hard. Though, all those problems I just mentioned arise from getting lazy, which not every game does. I do have to give credit where it's due, some games do switch up the different modes in order to make things more interesting. In Kingdom Hearts 2 or Ghost of Tsushima for example, the highest difficulty mode actually has all the enemies deal more damage, but increases your damage as well, meaning the game is much more punishing, but also rewards you much more for higher level play. Ghost of Tsushima in particular is amazing for this, because in a game about a lone samurai fighting hordes of enemies, you do feel that in the game's lethal mode. You're always one wrong move away from death, but if you're good enough, you can just cut through everyone like butter. Then, in my opinion, one of the most interesting series when it comes to difficulty options is Devil May Cry. In just DMC5 alone, there are 7 different modes. You've got your easy, normal, hard, which I'll just play with damage and enemy aggression, but beating any of those unlocks Dante Must Die, a mode where all the enemies and bosses have the ability to basically go Super Saiyan. Beat that, and you unlock Heaven and Hell mode, where you and every enemy in the game, including the bosses, die in one hit. After that, you unlock Hell and Hell mode, where you still die in one hit, but the enemies have their hard mode health bars, and then the special edition added Legendary Dark Knight mode, which just throws like twice the amount of enemies at you. That is a lot. That is an overwhelming number of options, but the game is designed around them. Devil May Cry's campaigns are only about 10 hours long. You can beat them in 1 or 2 sittings if you really get good enough. So the game uses its difficulty modes as replay value. Beat the game once at a manageable difficulty, go up a level and perfect that, rinse and repeat, until eventually you're good enough at the game to finish it without getting hit. The fun of the experience is that repetitive skill increase, so the difficulty options don't just exist to cater to more players, they are part of the progression of the game, and fit right in with the active scoring system that's already there. But before we can even get to the fun extra options when designing the perfect difficulty system, we still have to fix all the issues with difficulty options as a whole. Like, you know, the fact that in every game ever created, you pick the difficulty option before you start playing the game. Have you ever thought about how weird that is? You don't even know what the gameplay is, and you're forced to pick how hard you want it to be. Do you know how many people picked the Give Me God of War option in God of War 2018 and then got demolished by a mini-boss 2 hours in, just to find out they had to restart the entire game to lower the difficulty? That fucking sucks. Admittedly, most games do let you just flip between all the different options on the fly. Even God of War does this for everything but its hardest mode. But that introduces another problem. That being that many games, most notably big RPGs like the ones from Bethesda, have the player essentially use the different modes like the gear shift on a car. You're dying in one hit on hard mode, slap it down to easy to beat this boss. The next couple enemies barely scratch you, I forgot to crank it up to normal to have some challenge again. The game designer has essentially just offloaded the entire responsibility of balancing the game to the player, which isn't a great solution unless that player happens to enjoy opening the menu every encounter to tweak the amount of challenge. Also, what if easy is too easy, but normal is too hard for me? What if I enjoy the puzzles on hard, but not the combat? If you only offer these binary choices, you're always going to have people that fall between the cracks. Some games try to rectify this by just adding more. Shadow of the Tomb Raider even splits up every component of gameplay into its own category, with overall difficulty, combat difficulty, puzzle difficulty, and exploration difficulty each having toggles from easy to very hard. This is good in some ways. One of the options can specifically turn off the white paint on every climbable surface, which is something that annoys a lot of people. Except, oops, now I have to solve a combination lock in the menu every 15 minutes to try and find the optimal level of balance. No, if we truly want to design the perfect difficulty system, the different modes have to solve all these problems. They have to actually put effort into every single option so they all present unique challenges and fair balance, but there also has to be enough options that we can still match people's varying levels of skill, but not too many options so that people are constantly opening the menu trying to tweak things. Really, I think we should look into something that can simplify things. Resident Evil 4, both the original and I believe the remake, though Capcom is very tight-lipped about it, features something people have dubbed dynamic difficulty. The game still has a difficulty select screen with a pretty standard selection, but even after you pick one of those options, the game works to modify the challenge as you play. The basic way that it works is that your performance in the game is constantly monitored and measured, using metrics like how much damage you've taken, how many enemies you've killed, and how many resources you've used. And based on how good you're doing, the game will respond by changing the enemy AI, the amount of enemies or their spawn locations, and how much ammo and healing items they drop. So even if you've picked standard difficulty, if you start playing really well and get past enemies without wasting bullets, the game will respond by making them more aggressive and giving you less ammo. Likewise, if you're on hard but keep getting brought down to low health and can't seem to avoid hits, the game will drop more healing items for you and spawn less dangerous enemies. There's definitely more going on there, but that's the basics of it. And Resident Evil 4 isn't the only game to explicitly have an entire system built around this. The Left 4 Dead series actually does something very similar. It uses a so-called AI director to dynamically change the difficulty of the game for all 4 players throughout the course of a level, mostly by changing what zombies, weapons, and items spawn where. I don't know what it is about zombie games that makes devs want to go ham with the AI, but between these two games we have a pretty good idea for how it works. Though I'm pretty sure there's actually a ton of other games that sneakily add something like this to their gameplay. Even just one interesting example I'm sure not a lot of people think about being multiplayer games. I mean, think about it. If a game has a ranked mode or skill-based matchmaking of any kind, that is essentially a dynamic difficulty slider. The better you do at the game, the higher your rank gets, and the more challenging it'll be because you're pitted against other high-level players. Do bad enough and the game drops you down to a manageable rank with manageable players that should offer an easier experience. We don't often think of multiplayer games this way, but from the developer side, it's their best way of managing challenge, in a game where you can't change health or damage numbers or tweak AI. Which also means it's now susceptible to things like inting or smurfing, but that's a topic for a different video. Basically, when used properly, dynamic difficulty is genius, and I really think implementing it is a must if we're going to make the perfect system. It completely solves the major problems of static options in that it makes each of them cover a range of challenge instead of a single narrow band. Theoretically, with enough work put into it, you wouldn't even have to have difficulty options at all. Instead of easy, medium, hard, you could just flip between them on the fly, depending on how the player is doing. That gear shifter of balance would now be working on its own, which would make sure nobody gets stuck with a level of challenge they aren't having fun with. And all of that would massively increase the replay value and shake up a lot of the normal gameplay because you'd get a different experience with the game pretty much every time. The main downsides of dynamic systems really only comes down to how well they fit into the type of game you're making. Like, you can't really implement something like Devil May Cry's challenge modes because a one-hit kill difficulty isn't just something you can dynamically switch between. And once you do activate it, adding more health drops or gauging how well you do based on damage isn't possible anymore. So while it's not directly related to the rest, there is another implementation of a sort of dynamically adjusting challenge level that I want to talk about. That being the entire genre of roguelikes. Or rather, roguelites. They are two different terms, I do know that. I just purposefully don't care about the difference because genre names are stupid. Listen, no game has been like Rogue since the year 2000. Here's what Rogue looks like. Technically, every game that doesn't use ASCII graphics or a turn-based combat system isn't like Rogue. I know some people get mad about this on the internet, but just like, come up with a better name. We haven't called first-person shooters Doom clones since 1999. Anyway, nerd rant aside, roguelikes are a fantastically refreshing take on difficulty, because the genre revolves around randomly generated dungeons, enemies, and loot, with permadeath having you start over from the beginning if you fail. Naturally, this leads to a high degree of challenge and an inherent problem with how you balance things, but many modern installments in the genre have figured it out. Namely, that every run you do into a dungeon can net you some permanent buffs, item unlocks, or skill upgrades. So even if you keep dying over and over again in a game like Dead Cells, you should still be able to gather enough currency to increase the size of your health flask or the quality of the items you'll find, which carries over into the next run. The game is still focused on that permadeath randomization as its core mechanic, but it extends a hand to the player over the course of repeated failures, making sure you at least get a little further each time. Dead Cells then has additional challenges it gives you to move that difficulty in the opposite direction. Harder, optional routes through areas are always available, and there's time doors you can try to speedrun to if the level on its own isn't hard enough. You really have more than enough choice on how you want to tweak the game to find that perfect balance. notably without ever having to touch an options menu. This, to me, is sort of the other alternative to dynamic difficulty, where instead of taking the control completely out of the player's hands, you've now given them all the options to balance things just through the game's own mechanics. If you're specifically struggling with healing a lot, you can upgrade your healing items. If you get stuck on one particular level, you can usually find other ways around it. You don't have to do any of this, but it's all there within the game if you need it. However, we're pretty much there when it comes to making the perfect system. Dynamic difficulty really allows a game to accommodate everyone and feel fresh, on top of whatever balancing and static options we want to add. So why does it feel like I'm forgetting something? Hey, remember those 2 issues I brought up in the beginning of the video? Well, up until this point, we've really only focused on one of them. The idea that people enjoy different amounts of challenge. What we haven't focused on as much, and what many people forget to focus on, is the other issue. Everyone who goes into a game will have a different initial skill level. Everyone who plays a game will need to put a different amount of effort in to increase that skill level. Some people might have the physical and mental ability to become good at a game within a few hours, but others won't. Some may not even be able to reach the required skill level the game demands of them at all because of a disability. And it's vital that if we're going to create the perfect system, that we cater to everyone. Now, important note, accessibility and difficulty are not the same thing. They aren't even directly related in a lot of cases. There are many very easy games that are still super inaccessible and vice versa. For example, if you want to play Animal Crossing but you have some form of visual impairment, get fucked, I guess, because there's literally 0 options to help you out. If you can't read the text the characters are saying, the only audio cues you have are these incomprehensible sounds. Whereas during the research of this video, I saw someone who is completely blind do a Let's Play of The Last of Us Part 1 because that game adds so many options and audio cues that allow it to be playable. That blew my goddamn mind. Though, while they're not the same thing, accessibility and difficulty do overlap. Many people have both physical and cognitive limitations that will make games more challenging for them in specific and often overlooked ways, and accommodating them can often affect the difficulty of the game. Some of these accommodations are in the form of particular features, things like disabling button mash prompts or changing certain abilities from holds to toggles. Even aim assist is a great help to those with motor control issues. However, sometimes the best feature that you can give someone in order to accommodate them is a form of easy mode. If you haven't seen it, there's this fantastic video with less views than it deserves by a YouTuber named Frogwater. In it, he talks about accessibility and difficulty in games through the lens of someone with a relative who is not able to play many of them due to a lack of options. Even the easiest mode for some games is still too demanding. However, a game like Dusk is one of the first shooters that seemed feasible to play because it had an accessible mode built into the game. A significantly less demanding mode specifically added because the game's developer, David Szymanski, has a cousin with MS who they wanted to be able to beat it. And while I brought it up as an example of good harder difficulty modes, Ghost of Tsushima also has a lower intensity option you can choose in its accessibility menu, which forces the game into easy and adds a bunch of features that make it less demanding to play. Some of the unblockable attacks are now blockable, enemies detect you much slower in stealth, all your timing windows on parries are relaxed to let you hit them easier. And not only will enemies stop their combos if they manage to hit you, but they'll also avoid attacking you altogether if you go to heal. That's genius. It makes the game so much more approachable to play and surely less frustrating if you're having trouble. Even roguelikes have somewhat figured out the accessibility issue while keeping their core idea in mind. Hades famously had an option called God Mode that, once activated, instantly gives you 20% damage resistance. This on its own makes the game easier for most, but on top of that, every time you die, your damage resistance increases by 2% up to a maximum of 80, meaning that the game can still present a substantial challenge to you, but you're guaranteed to make progress as your skills and the buff keep increasing. The buff just standing in as an additional push forward while fitting right into the roguelike design philosophy. So there isn't any one-size-fits-all, this game is now accessible to everyone option that you can really implement here. But I think if we're going to perfect video game difficulty, it's a must to add in an accessibility option, at the very least. Some form of less intensive mode that can ideally be beaten by anyone. But just like any other option, we can't get lazy here. Just flat stat changes are one thing, but to make a truly perfect accessible mode, you really have to consider the kind of game you're making and the changes that will best accommodate a struggling player. God mode and low intensity mode are infinitely better implementations than if those games had just halved the enemy's health bar and called it a day. Also, final note, both Hades and Ghost of Tsushima don't lock you out of certain paths or achievements for picking the accessibility options. You can 100% both games either way. They do not treat these options as anything other than accommodations. And they certainly don't do the stupid fucking Wolfenstein thing where they call you a little piss baby for playing on easy. Like, come on man, I get what you're going for, but please understand that some people play on these modes because they have to, and calling them little bitch crybabies or whatever is not helping anyone. Anyways, on top of some form of accessible mode, the perfect system should also ideally include as many individual customization options as possible. The Last of Us Part 1 is a great template to follow here. Button holds, aim assist, toggles for abilities, or options like infinite underwater breath, so those sections aren't as punishing. I shit-talked Shadow of the Tomb Raider's gigantic list of difficulty settings, but in the context of accessibility, that's probably a lifesaver. So I'm not going to claim to be an expert here or even someone who's adequately informed. I can't list every possible option or feature that someone might need, but it is important that people are advocating for more options in general, which is why I'm going to finish off this segment by shouting out another creator. This one by the name of Laura K. Buzz. They run a fantastic series called Accessibility, where they review the accessibility features of many games and talk about more necessary requirements in the industry. Even if I can't cover every possible angle of this issue, I trust that advocates like Laura can, and so I think it's important that we listen to them. And I mean, honestly, I'm feeling pretty good about our perfect difficulty system. We've got all the puzzle pieces, now we just gotta fit them together. Implement some static modes that are all fair and balanced and interesting, make them all dynamic and responsive, and add in a bunch of in-game options to tweak them even further, plus a bunch of accessibility features and modes that can make the game beatable for everyone. I don't really see any possible way that we could fail at this point. Okay, so small problem. How do we implement all of these systems and dynamics and accessibility features we've talked about all in the same game without them, To give an example of what I'm talking about here, I see there's a lot of argument online about, say, an easy mode in Elden Ring. We are supposed to be accommodating the entire spectrum here. One rather large portion of that spectrum is people who enjoy difficult Souls-like games, which, as I went in depth on earlier, don't accommodate you at all. Another large portion of that spectrum is people who want Souls-like games to be more accommodating, which, Now, yes, there are ways of making the games easier. Summoning, magic, over-leveling, broken builds. There's lots of ways to completely cheese FromSoft titles that are 100% intended by the devs. I mean, the entire point of Solaire's character in Dark Souls 1 was basically the game designer screaming at you to use co-op. In Elden Ring, there was a famous online summon who would literally just solo the boss for you. But all of that only goes so far. It all lowers the skill floor, but even at its lowest, that floor is too high for quite a lot of people. Really, the only way to make sure the game is beatable by absolutely everyone would be a form of easy mode. Some lower intensity option like Ghost of Tsushima has. How do I know this? Because there's a mod for Elden Ring on the Nexus forums called Easy Mode, which has 250,000 downloads. Now, my thoughts on this are pretty controversial to some, but they're also the thoughts of many hardcore Souls fans. So to share them with you in a way that's easy to understand, I'm gonna use an analogy. Imagine you're trapped in a room with a bomb. You're stuck in there, no way out. There's an explosive device in the middle of the room. 5 minutes left in the timer, you're about to die. There's nothing you can do to run away or survive the explosion. Your only option is to try and defuse that bomb. That's what playing a Souls-like game feels like. That's the feeling people are chasing when they play difficult games. You're stressed out, you're panicking, you don't know what to do, but you only have one way forward. So you start examining the explosive and figuring it out. You learn which wires connect to which, and eventually you cut the right one, and you survive. The feeling of defusing a bomb in that situation would be the most euphoric, adrenaline-filled release you've ever felt. And you look at anyone beating a Souls boss that was giving them trouble, and you see that same sort of feeling. People freak the fuck out when they beat these games because of that overwhelming pressure we talked about earlier, all being released. They successfully defused the bomb. An easy mode, or any option that obviously lowers the difficulty of the game so that anyone could beat it, would be akin to putting a bomb-proof suit in that room with you. a way to survive the explosion even if you fail to defuse it on your own. And my argument with all this is that putting on that bomb-proof suit would drastically lower the amount of adrenaline and relief you'd feel by defusing. In fact, just the knowledge that the suit is in the room with you would make defusing the bomb less satisfying, even if you never put it on, because you know it's always an option. You're no longer forced to beat the system on its own terms. So that's why an easy mode would fundamentally water down the experience of playing a Souls-like for some people, even if it was an optional thing or strictly an accessibility feature. Yet, you might be thinking to yourself, you know what's worse than defusing a bomb with a bomb-proof suit on? Dying in an explosion to a bomb you couldn't defuse. I mean, obviously, I just spent the whole section talking about accessibility. Some people would rather even take a watered-down experience over not being able to play at all. Case in point, the 250,000 people who installed third-party software, which is obviously not the intended experience of the game, just to make it accessible to them. So this entire argument and analogy and example really leaves us with two opposite opinions that we have to contend with. Easy mode would ruin the game. Easy mode is necessary for those who need it. Both are completely valid in their own way and have their own supporters, but they completely contradict on a fundamental level. You cannot fully agree with one without rejecting the other. This, to me, is the dilemma of perfect difficulty. And I genuinely don't know how to solve it. I don't think that you can, because you can take any game I've talked about and run into this dilemma. How would you make any of them perfectly difficult? Could you implement accessibility options in Ghost of Tsushima without conflicting with a hardcore challenge? How do you stop someone playing Resident Evil 4 from feeling cheated when they learn the game has been helping them along? How would you even add a ton of challenge to overcome in a game like Stardew Valley? Like, what would you add? Taxes? Permadeath? Make everyone in the town no longer vaguely pansexual? I don't know. I think despite my efforts in this video, despite these different options and implementations I've looked at, I've run into an unavoidable brick wall. So I'll just say it. You can't perfect video game difficulty. You can't make a game that gets absolutely everything right for everyone. Now, I understand if you want to click off now, because I did lie to you at the beginning of the video. I apologize. I've made a severe and continuous lapse in judgment. But unfortunately, I don't have a ukulele, so instead I'll just say this. You don't have to. No reasonable person should expect you to make a game that's perfect for everyone, that is. What you should do is make a game that's perfect for the audience that'll enjoy it. Souls-like games already do this very well. Ghost of Tsushima and Hades and Resident Evil do this very well. But what you should also do is put in as much effort into that difficulty and the accessibility that comes with it as you reasonably can. Don't burn yourself out here, but definitely do not get lazy. Lazy difficulty helps nobody. It leads to long, tedious boss fights, bullshit one-hit kills, and unsatisfying gameplay. Lazy accessibility helps nobody. We're in a day and age where you can beat a prestige AAA third-person shooter with a blindfold on. You'd think Elden Ring could at least add closed captioning in a colorblind mode. The whole series' multiplayer system works entirely off of everyone being big solid colors, like, give me a fucking filter or something, come on. We've just spent a rather long time covering tons of different ways you can put a bit more effort into difficulty and challenge in your game. So while I don't expect perfection here, I'd at least appreciate a bit more thought put into newer releases. How many games could be improved by an unlockable one-hit kill mode, or a lower intensity option? How many could be improved by adding some sort of dynamic Left 4 Dead AI, or even just some basic accessibility features? We've seen that it can be done well, across both the AAA and the indie space. So honestly, I just want to hold the gaming industry to a higher standard. Just because perfection is impossible doesn't mean you shouldn't strive for it. Anyways, to at least try to deliver on the title of this video while my patron's names scroll up the side of the screen here, the perfect difficulty for me would look something like this. no difficulty options whatsoever. You boot up the game, it has easy, normal, hard built into a dynamic system like Resident Evil. You die enough times, you get booted down to easy. Do well enough, you go up to hard. Maybe even announce it like a scoring system. I think Cruelty Squad does something like that. The difficulty modes themselves would also probably be built around spawning in more enemies and items and stuff rather than toying with stats. Then, within the game, I'd have some form of upgrade system, where you can earn currency to buy stuff that increases or decreases the game's speed or everyone's damage, including your own. Just stuff that changes the way the game plays in a fair way. And then we add in an accessibility menu with that Ghost of Tsushima lower intensity option. I can't stress how cool that is, it just makes the game beatable for everyone in such a smart way. And then we just cram in a wall of options for visual, auditory input customization so you could play this thing blindfolded on a Guitar Hero controller if that's what works best for you. That, to me, would be the perfect difficulty system. It wouldn't work for every game, but I'd love to see something like it. If you have your own perfect difficulty system, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. And if you want your name in the credits like these cool people, you can get all that and more for just $1 at patreon.com/Lextorias, including a new feature, which is a custom role on my brand new Discord server. It's a public server, free for everyone and linked in the description, but patrons get a cool little badge for their support. Just wanted to shout that out. Come join, I'm pretty active there. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.